I'm going to get some more water and I'll be back.
Yeah. Return.
Also, maybe a bit of a practical question. I don't know how the other spin people are doing this, but for like the claying, I have to sort of lower my laptop screen, but then I cannot really look at my screen for any presentation or other stuff.
Maybe we can try out things now.
Yeah.
Put it far away enough, or yeah, I think we should try out things.
If not, maybe on your phones, you can open up the YouTube link. So then you can see the screen and then have this be the camera.
But I'm having actually trouble finding the link because it says I have to sign up on the website.
No, so you'll be able to watch it on YouTube or on the organization's website. It'll be live streamed.
Okay, so, but I wanted to share it with some people, and then I could find the Facebook Live, but I don't see a YouTube link on the website.
I think I sent it in the chat now.
Okay, thanks. Perfect.
I feel like we've got a little time, but if it's possible to play with lighting, I feel like that's an important factor as well.
So it's interesting. I can see myself on the live right now, super big, because I'm the only one who's speaking. Is that correct?
Yeah, so for the live stream, I already see that only the one who's speaking is visible.
It doesn't allow the view. So how will that work when, so will we be able to see Maria Theresa, or will we only see the slideshow? Ooh. That's amazing. So guys, can you hear me? Yeah, so guys, by the way, we have also with us in the room, Jeroen Laven, who is running the tech, and who I want to give a round of applause and thanks to already. Yeah, so guys, by the way, we have also with us in the room. Oh wow, we've got a lag. Who is running the tech, and who I want to give a round of applause and thanks to already. Oh wow, we've got a lag. Okay, that looks amazing. It looks really good with the spotlight. And so how will the spotlight look when I'm sharing screen? So is it possible, so now, and it's not possible to scroll through any of the rest of them? Any other screens? So you can kind of like scroll through it, like you can basically live edit. So is it possible, so now? Yeah, that looks awesome. I'm very excited by how this is looking. So basically, so if you look on like the YouTube site, which some of the students pointed out, we can sort of see how it looks. And what we would have is like a big screenshot of the slideshow, and then we can see you, Maria Theresa, in the corner. But Jeroen can also like scroll it through. So at a certain moment we see you, but also at a certain moment we just see hands. And then we see you again, and then we see hands again, and then we see you again.
Most excellent. Okay.
Thumbs up.
Oh, you figured out how to do it. How do you do it? Let's start also because there are people who are attending remotely and people watching online.
Yeah. Okay. We might just give it 1 or 2 more minutes before we start the introduction to see who else enters the room. So nice. I'm envious of the clay, huh? Where's my clay?
No, it's mesmerizing. This is great.
Yeah. I'm definitely envious of sitting here making my little pinch pot pieces. Yeah.
Yeah, we tried to get a clay that would be the same color as the artifacts, but it looks like they delivered the reddish clay instead of the yellowish one, but it looks good.
Maybe but maybe it dries also a little bit lighter. So
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe I've only used the white kind of this clay, but yeah, it looks really nice.
Okay, well, we might commence with my introduction while a couple more people come into the room. And perhaps there's also a couple of people tuning in on YouTube, or a couple of people tuning in also by Facebook Live. or also some people viewing with our live stream on the website. Clara, I might need you to mute for the introduction. Thanks. Thank you. Great. So, goedenavond and welcome in Meli once again. My name is Vivian Zahal and I'm the Research and Programs Manager. And I'm very happy to introduce tonight's Keynote program with our guest speaker, Maria Thereza Alves. It's the 5th in our new Keynote series, which invites singular voices and creates a new venue for coming together in reflection and exchange here in Rotterdam. And we're very happy to connect with Maria Thereza tonight, who is an artist whose work over more than 3 decades has really only grown in relevance and that contributes so much in exploring the kinds of aesthetic consciousnesses that are needed in challenging the long aftermath of European projects. Tonight, in effect, takes place in 2 components. The first is a keynote by Maria Thereza Alves, and the second is a reciprocal performative clay tactile experiment in what it means to be gathering online as we here in the Netherlands are moving into a second lockdown. So the keynote is titled after an artwork by Maria Thereza Alves called The Return of a Lake. And it's an artwork that expands over many years and that is composed together with an intergenerational campaign of Indigenous restitution in the Chalco region of Mexico. In particular, Alves collaborates with the Community Museum of the Valle of Xico, or Xico Valley, and it's a project that grasps the inseparability of culture or art practice from so-called nature, which in this case is the recovery of an afflicted lake through pre-Hispanic aquaculture or water-based agriculture. And to put that more simply, the project finds that the recovery of artistic materials and artistic practices is inseparable from the recovery of an ecology, which in itself is a very profound matter to consider. And the scholar Denise Ferreira da Silva recently discussed the project as one that overcomes the basic terms of debt and of currency that govern liberal politics. And she said, and I'm quoting, "The lake is not destroyed, and the claim is not to existence in economic terms, but to ancestry, composed by what existed because of the water and what cannot be measured." So we look forward to hearing more about this project from Maria Thereza. And meanwhile, the second component of tonight's program is an experiment in online gathering, which we're undertaking together with our guest moderator, Clara Balaguer, and together with the SPIN Coalition of Students at the Willem de Kooning Academy, who are dedicated to sustainability and climate action. Since September here, we've been experimenting with how to gather in ways that acknowledge our limitations and our needs, and how to navigate the social formatting of online tools. Our transition program of events through September culminated in a keynote with Silvia Federici, in which she insisted very strongly and very bravely as a woman of 87 years, that we must seek to find ways of meaningfully coming together for the reason of the kinds of consciousness that are possible when we dwell not only in our own thoughts, but in the spaces that physically lie between us. So she argued that an individuated way of being, something of a consciousness in a box, is the ideal governable subject, and we must strive for ways to work around that. So tonight we're experimenting with not only spending time hearing Maria Thereza's keynote, but as she shares her talk, we're going to be being joined by a kind of a tactile chorus of the SPIN group, who will be working in clay to make replicas of items that are currently withheld from the Community Museum of the Xico Valley, and which are the subject of a campaign for reclamation. So what are the knowledges that we can watch and observe in the hand, and how do they relate to what we hear from one who speaks? The Spin Group will also be compiling their reflections in a small publication that will be produced in a limited run and that will be posted to the Community Museum of Xico Valley as a tool in evidencing and buttressing their claims in relation to local political authorities. By way of introduction, we can note, I think, a few small and important things. Maria Thereza Alves herself is a renowned artist and activist, is much sought after for the depth of practice that drives her long-term projects, along with a deep grain of integrity and trust that she cultivates with the communities that are her collaborators and her co-creators. Alves was a recipient of the Vera List Prize for Art and Politics in 2016 to 2018. In 1978, as a member of the International Indian Treaty Council, she made an official presentation on human rights abuses against Indigenous populations in Brazil to the United Nations Human Rights Commission in Geneva. And she was also the co-founder of the Green Party of Sao Paulo in 1987. Following tonight's keynote, a Q&A will be led by Clara Balaguer, who is Head of Social Practices at the Willem de Kooning Academy, among many other roles and guises and antagonisms and friendships. And before we start tonight's keynote, I'd like to invite Clara to give a brief visual caption of our setup, which is to support the accessibility of tonight for any sight-impaired guests or later people who might attend the recording, as well as a way of sort of tuning in to where we are and how we are.
I'm sitting in a room bigger than the room I was in before I got here. It's a colorful room with many different shapes on the floors and on the walls. The wall straight in front of me is a bright pink, like bubblegum. I'm a woman. I'm dressed all in black, and I'm 40 years old, though maybe because I'm Asian, I look a bit younger. There are 3 people in the room with me. There is a man, he is sitting about 1, 2, 3, maybe 10 meters away from me. And to the left of me, there is a woman. She is seated maybe 3 meters away from me, and she is dressed in earth tones. On the screen where we are bottled in the moment, there are, I'm bad at math, so it's 4, 8, 12, 13 windows. Most of these windows or squares are focused on hands that are working with reddish clay. In the top left corner of the screen, there is Maria Thereza. She is sitting, she just waved at us, and behind her there is a beautiful mural from Tenochtitlan, I believe, and it is a painting of something like a tree of life, but maybe she can describe it better because she's sitting closer.
So behind me is a mural, and it's in Teotihuacan, and it is of paradise, or Tamachan, and it is the place of origin. And you will see it's a reddish color, and there's a tree of life, and there is the serpent goddess and her 2 helpers or priests, and water is falling everywhere from the tree and from their hands, and it's making plants grow from the bottom up. And it is a celebration of water and plants and pleasure, I guess. I'm wearing glasses, a dark burgundy cardigan, and next to me, which you can't see, is my favorite plant, which is in English called a maidenhair fern. And I like this plant very much because I always thought it was from where I'm from the Atlantic forest in the coast of Brazil. But it turns out that it is a plant that is in many places of the world. It's endemic in many places. So it's a plant that gave me a very important lesson to be actively there where you are and consider it home everywhere, and to be an activist everywhere. So I thank the plant, which you can't see. Next time, I think I will put the plant in with me. Shall I begin? So the images of the artifacts that you will see in the PowerPoint, like this first one, are from the collection of the Valle de Xico Community Museum in the state of Mexico, which defends indigenous culture, the land, the water, the seeds, the more than human, and the cyclical use of water. We have collaborated since 2009. This year, I am dedicating my public talks to the Valle de Xico Community Museum because they have been closed by the municipal authorities, an act considered illegal by the community. I would like to thank Meli for the invitation, and Vivian, Zerhel, and Clara Belaguer, and the Spin Collective for discussions, generosity of spirit, and intelligence, and good energies. Thank you. Spin is collaborating in this talk by working on some of the objects, which I will discuss towards the end of my talk. The Sky Beholder, which is what you're seeing here, tracks celestial objects above her skies on what was still the island of Xico on Lake Chalco in the basin of the Valley of Mexico. Xico means the navel, the center, lying between water and mountains, connected to more than we know. Comets sometimes pass by. They are supposed to foretell events. They continue to be complex to interpret. Planets continue on their ancestral paths. Stars help us find each other and land. Is it a good time to dig the earth? Is it a good time to plant seeds in the earth? Will the rain come? Will the sun return? Will the millions of birds that come to the lake return? Next image, please. This is Jipe. He encourages seeds to grow by bringing forth fertility upon the land and people. Next image. Chinampas float on the lake, so many. The engineers began constructing them around 1400 before the Common Era. These artificial islands absorb the water from its lower extremity, and there is no heavy back-breaking work to irrigate the fields. The maize grows tall and straight. The beans curl up around the stalk, and squash sprawl on the ground between the stalks, growing as a community without competition. Next image. From the lake of Chalco and its neighbor, 20 million tons of maize was produced. All the 5 lakes interconnected with each other, forming one system, managed to prevent flooding and yet allow for agriculture even during the rainy season. Xico was the granary for Tenochtitlan, the Mexica capital of 200,000 people. This is all before the invasion from those over the sea, which would bring the immediate death of 90% of all during the life of the invader Cortez. And by the eve of the Mexican Revolution in 1910, 99% of the land was owned by the non-Indigenous. What you are seeing, that image, is what has now become Mexico City. Next image. Quetzalcoatl, the shiny being, the feathered serpent, deity of air, of wind, of knowledge, of writing, books, art, music, and dance. His blood gave birth to people. He is also the Lord of the Star of Dawn, greeting us for the glory of a new day. On top of the hill of Xico, there is a cavity where it is said Quetzalcoatl awaits the right moment to return, and that is when the land will return to the people of the land. A few years ago, there was an attempt to build over that cavity, a tourist resort, after the people of the land protested much, as it takes much effort here for the land to remain. The resort was not built. Instead, the government built an eco park. We should put that in very big quotes, eco park, which caused destruction to the archaeological site and the environment. Next image, please. About 100 years before that, at the turn of the 20th century, all the water of the lake was swallowed up by Inigo Noriega Lazo from Columbus in Spain, who bought the island, but not the lake. That had been communal. In Spain, he is much admired for this act of what would not only turn out to be massive destruction, but long-lasting. For forever, the people of the land will live with the ecological and environmental disaster for which he is celebrated in Spain today. Next image. Tlaloc, deity of water, lightning, rain, agriculture, and thus fertility. Inigo's theft of the waters severely affected and destroyed 23 towns and communities and obliterated the economic base of the people of the land. Next image. The Spanish had first invaded 400 years earlier. The systematic destruction of the water system began then. All the 5 lakes began to have their water sucked out, and then water had to be imported, an expensive process because there was no more water in Mexico City, which began to steal the water of the people of the land nearest the city. And finally, there came the time of Xico's water to be stolen. That was in the 1980s. What was left of the water from its aquifer was stolen to send to the city. Now the people of the land of Xico have water 2 days a week for a few hours, and 30% have no access to water. Next. Inigo's private army of 250 soldiers violently removed the Chalcos from Xico. It became common to have 27 hectares of land because of Inigo and his people. In this area, 8 hectares of land are necessary to live. It is the minimum necessary to live here. This image I took from within the museum in Spain, celebrating the ecocide of the lake and celebrating his army, his private army. Next. This is Raimundo Martinez. His grandparents were forcibly taken to lands on the low-lying areas, which floods, and his subsistent crops, his maize, his beans, his squash are destroyed. The people called this new home Xico Nuevo, or New Xico. Raimundo still goes to the top of the hill of Xico, the real home, where Quetzalcoatl lies, and grows some corn there to remember. In 2012, there was an earthquake for the first time in the area. Its epicenter was Raimundo's home, New Xico. It was caused by the theft of water from Xico to Mexico City. Next image. The removal of the water from the aquifer causes the entire area to sink 40 centimeters a year. Imagine what this process is doing to the water. Imagine what it is doing to the sewage pipes. The dry lake bed also began to sink. A depression was formed, and rain began to collect. After some time, a new lake came into being. Next image. It is possible to recover and restore the relationship with the water and the lake in the area. The return of the lake is not opposed to change. This work is not about purity. Very extensive documentation shows that before the time of the Spanish conquest, the lakes have been completely transformed by human action, which, however, maintained the indigenous cyclical use of water, a place for the more than human and the human. The work does investigate how the colonial practices implemented by the colonizers continue as an everyday reality against indigenous communities that continue to resist. But colonialism continues to obstruct the Americas. Next image. The Return of a Lake was originally commissioned by Documenta 12 and was later exhibited in a solo show at MUAC in Mexico City, where there were funds to make a catalog. Those days are gone, I suppose now. I asked instead that MUAC ask the Valle de Xico Community Museum what they would like to do with the monies. The community museum, said they wanted to organize a cycle of 5 conferences on water, which would result in a joint declaration signed on the last day between NGOs from the region to act in unison in their struggle to defend the water. During the preparation of the conferences, which would bring together activists from water struggles from the 1980s to the present, the activists from the 1980s had confronted the federal army in order to maintain their water. There were also scientists, community groups, and others. During that time, a group of graniceros were found. Genaro Amaro Altamirano, one of the co-founders of the Community Museum, and I wrote a poem to honor the graniceros. It was originally in Spanish, and I have translated into English. I will read some of it. The image that follows is of a hidden altar made by the graniceros. It is an altar to water, and it is inside a cave. If you can put the next image, please. Graniceros of the Chalco Amecameca region in the state of Mexico. They manage the forces of water, lightning, hailstorms, thunderstorms, drought, hurricanes, and the rainbow. And they make petitions for rain to grow, beans, corn, and squash. And they make petitions for rain for life. They have hidden for the last 500 years. They are persecuted by the Catholic Church. Hidden, maintaining the sacred cycle of the relationship of water and life. Still hidden, they continue as guardians of the water cycle, hidden in the corners of the mountain where water springs up and where life is generated. Tlaloc, half jaguar, half snake, walks among the marigolds and guides the rains. In the mountains at the edge of the forest where mist is a place, Tamuachan is there, the flower garden, the place of origin. Tlatloacan, paradise is there, the cosmic tree is there, a celebration of the cycle of water, life, and vegetation. The settlers, they continue to remove the water from here to bring it over there. They continue to take the bodies from here. They continue to take the lands from here. They continue to unmake the culture from here. But on May 3rd, the people still petition the rain so that there is no lack of crops. With white flowers for the clouds and blue for the sky, they cover the altars and temples of the mountain and are sprinkled with blessed water. And to Tláhuac, they offer more flowers, fruits, and even more. The rains that Tláhuac brings make the mushrooms sprout. In the father of the forest is a spirit is born. It is the niñito mushroom. Ingested, a dialogue is created in the sacred mirror of the Tezcatl, between those of here and the spirits. And so the sacred is built, and so the divine of the mountain is built. It is the moment to remind ourselves of the precipice that we are in. This was written in May of this year. This first part of this talk was to give the place of the earth where the Valle de Xico Community Museum is located. When I arrived in 2009, I contacted Don Genaro Amaro Altamirano, the chronicler of the Community Museum. I asked, what can I do as an artist? A meeting was called with the community, and after discussion, they requested that I tell the history of Xico and the lake and its people. And this resulted in the return of a lake. Next image, please. The museum is a local community initiative founded in 1996 to actively defend their indigenous culture. Indigenous culture is still considered a dangerous activity in colonial America. For the opening of the museum, soldiers arrived and threatened to close the museum. In the Americas, there is no post-colonization. Next image, please. Without financial support from the government, but under threats and intimidation, the Community Museum was able to save almost 5,000 pre-invasion artifacts from oblivion or destructions, since there is no other institution in the municipality interested in protecting this cultural legacy. These artifacts were donated to the museum by members of the local community who found them in the surrounding area. It is these people from the community who have resisted until today the elimination of the social and cultural heritage of indigenous peoples, without which we would only be a pathetic lover of Europe, as Jimmy Durham has said. Next image. Senor Onésimo is responsible for finding one of the most important artifacts because he is always walking on the hills looking for forage with his cows. Cristina is a botanist who is interested in making a cacti garden in the museum. Senor Juan picks up paper on the streets to sell. He has also found many important pieces because of his work looking down on the street. Next image. This is Senor Hanado looking at a construction debris used to fill the lake. It was placed on the side of the highway. On closer inspection, it was found to contain archaeological artifacts. Due to Mexican laws, it is no longer possible to save them. They are at the bottom of the lake. The rain comes and brings it to the lake. Next image. On August 5th, 2010, 25 police officers with bulletproof vests and weapons arrived at the museum to arrest Hanado Amaro Altamirano. These were the people who tried to protect Senor Hanado. Raimundo, a school teacher, Yesnia, she worked in the market, Yawaka, he's a baker, and I. We were able to negotiate the transfer of the artifacts to dry rooms and to contact a lawyer for Senor Hanado. Next image. By 2012, Don Hanado was considered by the local government to be the greatest threat to the region, and this in a region of extreme high crime. For his work in support of indigenous culture and for the cyclical use of water, security forces threatened him. Now, let's pause and think about the consequences of this. The colonization that continues daily in the Americas. It is a colonization specifically against all that is indigenous, the people, the land, the resources, the cultures, the languages, and the knowledge. Against this community museum with much effort put together by local community in a high crime rate, poverty-stricken area. Next image, please. What interested me, especially as an artist for this work, was to reactivate a chinampa. And we studied to see what were the best possibilities of agricultural products for the situation because the water had become salty. Here, Senora Leticia is with the results of this attempt. We did well, as you can see. In Mexico, the resistance of the indigenous communities to the usurpation of their land and culture is present all the time. The growing of the squash blossoms is resistance. Next image. In 2012, The Return of a Lake was presented at Documenta 12 in Kassel, Germany. I requested that Senor Hanado be invited to give a talk as an attempt to give more visibility to the museum and to Senor Hanado who had death threats. Next image. On his return from Kassel to Xico, Don Hanado organized community meetings to discuss and showcase contemporary art. 2 years later, a collective of young artists was created in Xico that has generated a sense of identity and a creative reflection on the environmental problems of the area. Next image. The museum also does work in other regions. In 2013, the museum went to the Nahua community in the state of Guerrero to give a workshop on how to make a community museum, all from scratch. How to preserve archaeological artifacts, how to repair them, how to exhibit them, and how to conserve them. It was not possible to finish the workshop due to pressure from municipal security forces. Next image. In 2018, the community museum returned to the main building where it had previously been housed after extensive renovation by the municipality of the local hacienda. On February the 11th, 2019, just 1 year after the museum reopened its door in its official space, next image please, the municipal government closed the museum. In the official letter sent by the municipality, no reason was given for the closure of the museum. Not even a reason was given, okay? When I was sent this image by the museum, I counted how many police were there. It's about 12 to 13. It's a super high crime area with kidnappings, with murder, drug cartels, huge thefts that happen in an entire neighborhood. Lights are cut off, and then house doors are broken down, and people are put in a strange situation. So they see that what is the most important thing to do with 13 police? Put them in front of the museum so that the community cannot go through the gate to their community museum. This is colonization. Next image. This is a volunteer who was attacked by the police. She was responsible for showing the museum that day that the police arrived. Next image. The museum continues to work in its community, even though it does not have a physical space. Next image, thanks. And the community continues to protest the closure of their museum. The name you're seeing there, Tenorio, he was the mayor who closed the museum, who sent the letter that stated no reason for the closure of the museum. It is written on this banner, Tenorio, the archaeological pieces are not yours. They belong to the people. The museum has requested actions to disseminate and support their situation. Next image. I've been doing several actions, including performances in different exhibition venues in Europe. And this is my latest attempt to respond to the request for support. It is a book called Thieves and Assassins, A Brief History of Families, Colonization, Immense Wealth, Land Theft, Art, and the Valle de Xico Community Museum. It was published in July of this year. The book tells the story of Xico and its riches taken by Hernan Cortez, and finally ending up in Naples, Italy. The next heir to the title of the Marquesa of the Valle of Oaxaca, which is still an active title. So just imagine what that is as an active title. If you imagine that the genocide rate was 90% at the time of Hernan Cortez, that this title is kept active and what that means. The title, the next heir, will be a young Spanish woman who works for her aunt's gallery. The gallery is based in Madrid and Mexico City. There is no post-colonization in the Americas. Next image. The members of the community do not have access to the collection or the documentation section of their museum. The community no longer has access to its contemporary art. The museum is under federal jurisdiction, and therefore the community considers this closure by a municipal authority to be an illegal act. Next image. It is the end of 2020 and the museum remains closed, but they continue to work in their community. They built a shack outside the official building where the museum is housed, and that is where they are working. Next. Xico, the navel, the center, connected to more than we might know. Next. Son del Pueblo, of the people, is a project I'm doing now as a response to the request of the museum. The collaborators are asked, and I invite all of you from this talk to make a ceramic object based on the collection of the community museum. The images of the works will be published on the museum's website, as well as on my website and Instagram, and we hope the authorities will recognize the importance of returning the museum to the people of Xico, while we make the extensions of the museum throughout Europe. The image, next image. The image may include the collaborator and should include the work in the context of the studio or home of the person who made the work, also their name and city of residence. The ceramic work does not need to be glazed or fired in a kiln. Next image. Colonization is a daily contemporary event in the Americas, which affects all possibilities of being in the Americas today. Before post colonization can be discussed, we need to decolonize. It is therefore necessary that the Valle de Xico Community Museum reopens. Thank you.
Do I start? Yes. Well, thank you, Maria Teresa, for your talk. I've written down a lot of questions and a lot of notes. Let's see.
Okay.
I guess with, yeah, maybe chronologically through my notes, you started with this almost literary contextualization and what you called like sort of placing us in the context. I imagine that you did this for the benefits of those who may not be familiar with this story. But I wonder, is it ever exhausting to have to provide so much context for a foreign audience?
It is, and it's also, it becomes so interesting because you have to remember what the audience might not know. So every time I presented in different parts of the world, in some parts I have to explain what is a lake because it's in a place that has no water. So it's a good situation for making visible all the things that we take for granted sometimes in a place we are in or in context that we know, and how do you put this information in a context that's understandable for the audience, and also not exoticize it, but treat it as a daily situation where I'm speaking from.
I think, yeah, no, you're not frozen anymore. Yeah, we're doing
No,
this.
no,
Yeah.
no. I finished. I finished.
No,
the
no,
response.
I was doing this because I thought you were frozen. We said we'd do a.
No, I'm fine.
All right. Yeah, and you were talking about the process with MUAC. I believe that was the museum where you later on, so this museum where you later on worked with the Valle de Xico community museum, and there was this process of asking the indigenous community who managed their own museum what they wanted to do with the funding that was coming from this larger art institution. And it speaks to this willingness to be of service that I see in your work, and you in other talks that I've watched. You mentioned this. You mentioned that you in a way you do what you're told, and in your many years of working with communities, was being at the service of the community. And kind of finding these latent and existing desires, always your method? Or did you have to learn how to listen this deeply?
I was taught by different communities along the way to be a better listener. And certainly Xico has been a wonderful group of mentors in helping me become better at this. And since we've been working together for such a long time, I think it's a wonderful process because every year that our relationship develops and continues, and try to use my skills that also develop in new ways to collaborate with important events or situations of the community. So it has been a process. You have to remember I began in the late 70s to work. And at that time, there weren't texts out there to explain anything. If there were, I wouldn't have read them anyway. So it has been a long process, and people have been very kind and generous to have time to teach me.
And I mean, I often find like in teaching art students, or like, yeah, trying to, how do you teach a socially engaged practice? And I also do believe that, yeah, you do have to, in a way, do what you're told. And this pushes against so much of the individualist education and practice within the art world. And I found in my own practice that there is an agency. Like when you sort of give yourself over and be of service, there is a space for your own agency. And yeah, I guess I was interested, what is that space that you've, or how have you found that space for your own agency as an artist? And is it even important to you to feel agency within service?
I think it is important for me. I went through this very long process to figure this out, and went all over trying to deal with it. And what works for me is to meet with the community, to ask what is important for the community. I explain what I am good at and what I am not good at. I cannot draw or paint people, so please don't ask me this. But then there are other things I'm very good at. So we come to an understanding of what might be interesting for the community. But of course, along the process of this, along the research and developing the work, I have my own interests that have been built from a discourse with the art community and a long discourse with different communities, and living in the Americas, living in Europe. So there are things that I become interested in that for the community might not be so important, but to me they are. So then I very much try to figure out how to do both, what the community requests of me, and what I think is also important for the discourse. Of course, checking with the community if it's something that is of interest to the community. I would not, as I have seen some artists force situations upon the community that they have no interest in. So I try very much to ask if it's helpful, and if it is not, then I think of something else.
We have a question. We're actually writing. You can't. We have a shared Google Docs with the SPIN group, which is composed not just of students but also satellite friends and teachers. And a question has appeared in yellow highlights. And the question is from Shiloh. She says, part of the ongoing colonization seems to take place both in the material and in the cosmological realm, killing the people, draining the resources, expelling and ignoring the gods. The Christian God imposed a mediator, breaking the direct animistic relationship with the natural world. Can you speak more about the spiritual, material dimensions of decolonization?
I cannot, because I would be speaking in place of communities that should be speaking. What I do try to do in my work is to give spaces for these situations, like mentioning the graniceros. And I wish that once they could be invited to give a talk about what they're doing, because they have had to remain hidden. So I think what we need to do in answer to that question is to invite some people who are frontline activists in these situations to speak about it, because it is something that's not very much out there, and it is still this persecution is still very active, and I think it would be important to highlight this and to give space to these very courageous and brave people to talk about their situation. There is a film, and I'm really bad at titles. It was about a shaman in the Amazon, and the church moved in, converted the community. He became the doorman of the church, and then a local woman was bitten by a snake, and he knew the herbs to cure this woman, and he cured her, and then she answered, "Thank God." So these are situations, I think. Thank you for that question. We need to open up spaces for this discussion.
You mentioned, like, again, this listening to the front line and listening to the different activist groups that are already sort of embedded in these communities. And I think you also, like, in your kind of body of work, you also listen to other practices and frontline. So you've worked a lot with scientists, with botanists, and there is this very kind of scholarly approach to your work. And I was wondering, like, what are the tensions, like as an artist working with professionals in the field or frontliners who are kind of closer to really, really close to these sufferings, like what are the tensions that you've encountered between like, yeah, being an artist engaged in this kind of research and working with NGOs, scientists and other kind of contingent fields?
Well, the tensions is, for example, having to be with these 3 other people and 24 police that come to arrest a co-founder of a museum. One is not taught. How does one negotiate with 24 police? What is the law, the language of the law in that situation? You know, it was me, an artist, it was a baker, a market person, and a teacher. We're not instructed in this information. We didn't have workshops on these things. Tensions are very high. If a community is in a situation where there's protests, I participate. Somebody one asked me that they thought it was strange that I would have participated in helping confront the police over the arrest order for Henaro. And I was wondering, why wouldn't you? Especially since I was in a position of privilege for that situation. And that would be the minimum that I could do, the minimum. I worked in the International Indian Treaty Council. I went to do an interview with Tupai, who would be my mentor. The situation just to get to the reservation was extremely difficult and stressful for a young woman that I was at the time. That is life. The majority of the people on this planet don't get to not have stress on every day of their lives or violence on every day of their lives. And
I mean, it's true what you say, that there is, and I think I've encountered this myself in the field, that it's just who teaches you how to negotiate, who teaches you how to deal with 150 fishermen who are angry about I don't know, a building going up in there, I don't know, like, so that's precisely why I'm in the department where I'm in at the Willem de Kooning, at the social practices department, to try and save people or like save the students the pain of having to learn these things through failures and hurts on the field. I was wondering like how you incorporate yeah, I feel like you work a lot with students there seems to be a pedagogical component also to what you do, and how important is it for you to incorporate this pedagogical urge and dovetail that with your work?
I don't know if it's pedagogical urge. What it is knowing that there's so much important art out there in the world, that there are amazing artists out there in the world, and amazing people doing cultural activities, and just that this information, like I'm a conduit for information. I see it more like that. And I had started my art practice at a time when all of this information that now there are books about and treatises and many PhDs didn't exist, and we kind of had to invent it all. And so I was in that process of learning, and I think it's important to know that you don't know all the answers. No matter how many books you're going to read, it's not going to help you to go out and do the work you want to do. And yes, you will make mistakes, and you will learn to listen better from these mistakes. Your mistakes, you should, I think, figure out how to not make mistakes that will hurt people. And it is a process, and none of us have any way to figure out how to get to the end of it, except giving experiences we've had and say, oh, this was really wrong that I did. Don't ever try to do it this way because X happens, or something like that. and then somebody from the group can also say, don't ever do it this way. I just did, I went out and went to do this way, and it doesn't work that way. So I like it when there's a group of us. I think it comes from liking, I worked a little bit in theater, and you work together for a common project. And I really love this. I love being in a group where there's not an ego situation. You have everybody, and you want to make the best thing possible for this event that's going to take place. So I look at it upon the possibilities that you're with people, a community with students, whoever's there, and then there's a possibility of something happening.
It's like the theatrical cast, like an ensemble.
It's not the theatrical, it's just like
I was thinking more perhaps of performativity and
no, I wasn't. No, it's about the energy of it. It's the energy of all these people that are very good in their fields, getting together, putting aside their ego, and working and putting in what they can to the project. I think of it more in that direction.
Does anybody from the spin group, like any of our sculptors, do they have any questions? If you have a question, you can, or if you don't have a question, you can signal me with your hands. I do have a follow-up question from Shiloh. There's like the last part of her previous question was, can you speak more about the spiritual material dimensions of decolonization? And she writes a kind of a clarification. So can you speak more about the spiritual material dimensions of decolonization? Clarification is the role of ritual, of direct action, of gardening, working with our hands, of cultivating direct relationships with the land. In other words, what can decolonization look like in the context of the communities you are working with?
Well, in the Return of a Lake, it was the Chinampas. And originally I had, there's only one road out of Xico to Mexico City. It's a small road, and it floods during the rainy season. But on the left, there's the lake coming up, returning. And on the right, there's the lake returning. And I wanted, when people are leaving towards Mexico City, on the right, there was a little bit of a land base with the water coming up. And I thought it would be important if we could make a chinampa there, and then get a little boat. And then people would go and use the chinampa. They would go to the museum and sign up to use the chinampa as a collective space, an outside collective space. And there would be a little boat to use to get to the chinampa and do your activity and then come back. And my idea was that from the road, because I was trying to figure out how do people see it, because a lot of the chinampas are in more isolated areas away from where there's a lot of people. And there was a possibility where everyone coming in and out by bus and by car would be seeing this chinampa and would become interested in, oh, what's happening over there, and the possibility of making places for people to be on the lake. So that was one thing I really wanted to do, but it didn't work out because for some reason the water level the year I had seen it was quite high. So you could put a little boat in there and get to the little land that we were going to make bigger into a chinampa and plant crops on. But then after that, it hadn't rained enough to have the water up. So then we ended up doing the chinampa in the community of Tláhuac. And this was, once you enter Tláhuac and the reservation, it was to the left. And we were able to reactivate these chinampas. But then after, I think about 2 years, they were destroyed. They were landfilled and sold as real estate. So there's different possibilities of situations that include ritual, that the research process can also be a ritual. I'm trying to do that now with a project in Napoli with the archives, the Pignatelli Cortez archives there. I would like to get funding to bring people from Xico to Naples, because the archive mentions tribute money that was paid by the indigenous community of Xico to Hernan Cortez, and therefore eventually ended up in Napoli. The archive is very rich in information. There's thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of documents. Each, like, I don't know, folder you might call it, of documents is about this. It's like 800 pages, and that's just one, right? And I want somebody from Xico, or two people from Xico, to be able to come to the archive and spend 1 or 2 months there to study, so that the archive returns back to the community. And I see that as a ritual process, and of the archive, and having ended up there. So there's different ways to work, and it always depends on the project.
I remember, like, leading up to this talk, we've had like a few conversations with you, and we did have a clinic with the SPIN students, wherein we gestated sort of this idea that's being played out on the screen. And I remember you said in that conversation, or you alluded to the fact that white bodies have a specific role to play in exacting or in drumming up support for projects like, or injustices like the ones that are the one that led to the closure of the Valle de Xico Museum. So yeah, I guess it's a bit of a yeah, what is the role of white or European or colonial or privileged bodies in relation to these stories that in some way implicate us all on different levels? And why is it so important for you to leverage these bodies?
It is because when the museum was first closed, I was trying to figure out what to do. So I was very impressed with this poster, a banner that said Tenorio, the archaeological artifacts are not yours, they belong to the people, to the pueblo. And so they were not getting at that time any press, except very local press, very small local press. And I was wondering, what does it take to make it possible that the national press looks at their situation? And I thought, oh, it would be nice, because it is colonized, the Americas. So what is of highest value is Europe. And European language, traditions and art, culture, etc. So I thought this could be an important moment to use the European body, a wealthy body, visibly, so that the descendants of the colonizers in Mexico in this situation could see that these white bodies find that this culture in Mexico, that these artifacts are of worth, are of import, which the colonizer in Mexico refuses to see because of the colonial situation. So I had, I did some performances. I started with, it just happened, I'm not a great thinker of these things, but it just happened that I was giving a keynote speech at an opening of a show in Leuven at Stuck. And I asked if I could do a performance about the situation. And so I had the banner in English and a banner in Flemish. And I asked people from the audience if they wanted to participate in the action to come and stand behind the banner. And and I sent the images right away to the community museum. And from this image, just this one image, they were able to get national press coverage, finally. You know? So it took white bodies well-off white bodies to convince the press in Mexico that the indigenous artifacts in this museum are of worth to be discussed. So then I did that in several other places, but it really worked with the first one. And then it, it was a repeat, so it didn't quite work. So then I've been trying to think of what else to do. I did the book, and then lockdown came, and I wanted to learn how to work with ceramics. And then I said, oh, I have all these images of the collection of the community museum, which they asked me to take when there was a flooding issue and we had to pack everything very quickly. And so I started to look at the collection and to look at some simpler works and start to learn ceramics. And then slowly I became more adept at making the more complicated pieces. And then I thought, this could become a work that brings back attention to the museum, and that involves more and more people. And the campaign would be important to be a successful campaign in Europe for it to have repercussions in the community because of the colonial situation again.
I mean, I do have more questions, but I guess it's a good time to also, I did write it in the chat, but for the attendees, not just the SPIN students, but the other people who are in the Zoom chat, if you would like to ask questions, there's the little Q&A box that you can use as well.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to look at these magnificent artifacts coming into being.
Yes. Carla, you seem
I have a question. Well, we actually had a question because we were wondering about how did the art world during Documenta 13 respond to the Son del Pueblo, especially because the Return of the Lake was commissioned by Documenta. Like, did you get any support from them?
No, because I just did it now, this past in the lockdown very recently. So.
All right.
Yep. And Documenta is now in what, 2 years or something like that, right? Or in a year. Yeah. And I've been wanting to, with the Son del Pueblo, to me has been more important to work with, with younger artists, with students also, because I think, I don't know how to put it into words exactly. But I think it is important to connect directly with the situation, and because otherwise we're asked to sign petitions, and I always have a very much a problem. I know they're important. I'm not criticizing them for that. I know they're important, but I always have a problem with that because I know it's just like signing something, and it doesn't. Where does our energies go with that? And I feel like I should be more energetic in that situation, put more of myself into it, a situation like that. So with Son del Pueblo, I think it's not just about a petition, it is about extending the museum as much out and further out that we can, so that the municipality in Xico can see that by their closure, each time it's closed, the museum grows more, and that our response is to be more active in defense of the museum, and that we are creating small museums of Xico in different parts where we make 1 piece, 2 pieces, 5 pieces. I made 7 in Naples, so I have these that I can show people when I'm there. And I think this, if you're wanting to work with communities, is a beginning to figure out how do you participate as an artist, how do you work specifically with the needs of a community and be active in it in a way that might be helpful to the community.
I guess as a follow-up to the previous question, you did say now again, you think it's important to work with students. I was listening to a talk where you were also talking about this collaboration that you had with some students in Brazil. And there do seem to be a lot of pedagogical components. I'm wondering why, and I guess I'm thinking also sitting here at Valle and understanding that this space is part of like a collective learning program, and how pedagogy is becoming important to this institution in their bid to kind of decolonize. And I was wondering why when I asked you about it, you didn't want to situate your work within a pedagogical urge. Was it the word urge, or was it the word pedagogy?
It was pedagogy, which I don't. I shouldn't have a problem with that word. I don't know why there was a, you know, because one of my favorite thinkers is Paulo Freire and Pedagogy of the Oppressed. So I take that back.
You also push back against theater, actually, and I was thinking of the theater of the oppressed. So I was wondering,
or Boal's,
yeah, I'm sorry,
Boal.
Boal, but yeah, like I wonder why in the art worlds we almost like that's a reflex against these forms that are, I guess, contingent. But for me, like, I don't know, the artistic practice within community does have an element of theater and entertainment, because you become the entertainment in this, you know, in the far-flung community. You're the outsider that comes in and the new thing that happens. And it's like, oh, I'll come because something's happening. And I wonder why we, and it's an open question, not an accusation or anything.
No, I understood. Yeah.
Why?
I think part of it is category. You know, it becomes like another category, and so just I always have problems with categories. So I think like that was my reaction was that like I go off into one category or another, and I just like to keep things a little bit open.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a form of fluidity, actually, of saying that this kind of practice, I mean, what is the role of art or the power of art in, like, you know, outside of the ivory tower? And it's, it involves so much, a bit of social work, a bit of theater, a bit of education, and of course, this labor of making. And it is a fluid relationship. So it wasn't meant to put you in any box.
No. I would like to talk about, do we have time? Do we have 3 minutes?
Yes.
Yeah. I think there was a performance I once went to, I think a decade ago, at in Tromsø, Norway, and I've written about it. I don't write much about art because I'm not good at it, but once in a great while I do it because it needs to be done. And it was a performance by Ande Sombe, and he's a Sami. And I came in and a flight that came in late, so I only saw the middle of the performance towards the end. And he's in the performance space, going around and around with the telephone and speaking legal language in English. And then he puts the phone down and he sings in Sami, and then goes back and forth between these two, and it builds up, and it's a very powerful performance. And it is about the about a Norwegian government case against the Samis who wanted the return of lands. And the Norwegians asked for a written document proving that they lived on the land. I write that kind of logic. And the Samis responded with a song, a traditional song that spoke about the land, the more than humans, the humans, and the relationship, a very ancient song. And the Norwegian government said, no, that's not admissible as evidence. And Ande Sombe was the lawyer who defended the Sami and made the song be accepted as evidence. And he's not only a lawyer, he's also a judge, a former judge. He's also a law professor, an amazing performance artist, and a yoika singer. Yoika is a traditional Sami song. And I just like very much that way of being. That was so clear, you know. You do what is needed, and without having, he has to define himself because he is in Western society. But as a Sami, it's fluid, as you were talking before. It is this fluid change that you go from one situation to another, and your skills that you are good at, you do the best you can. If you are not good at poetry, don't do it. But if you are, why can't you be an artist and a poet and a this and a, you know? But it's just being fluid with the necessities of where you are. And I think maybe we should just end all the other categories and just be fluid with necessities. And that makes it more open and allows us more space. Because I was thinking also of this other Sami artist, Aslak, who was if we have to Western categories, a poet, researcher, a sculptor, a painter, a teacher. And he just done an amazing book that I always have in 2 copies of. And he has poems. He was an amazing activist because the yoik was illegal in Finland. No, yeah, in Finland. No, Norway, Finland. In Finland for a long, long time. And he was the one that broke that made it be legalized. So he also did that. And he has a beautiful poem about getting on a sled and leaving on Friday and traveling 8 hours in the snow to go to visit his lover and go into the warm bed and then goes into the warm bed of the lover and then gets up on Sunday and goes 8 hours back to be able to teach on Monday. And it's a beautiful poem. It's a very short, beautiful poem. And if you are an artist who is an activist, you might consider that frivolous, no? A love poem. You can see that. I've seen that situation happen. So why not just get rid of these categories and say, you know, at this moment with his lover, he needed to write this beautiful poem, which we quite enjoy. And that is of import, as is his activity to legalize yoik.
Well, maybe it's like a Western activism. I mean, I'm thinking of like the Philippine activist community, and I just attended a few months ago, an online memorial service for, like a lady who was kind of instrumental to the anti-dictatorship movements from the 70s up to now. And anyway, like in her online memorial service, there were people who were performing songs, like songs of the revolution, like for us at least, like or what I've seen, like, and because there are so many artists in at least before in the pushback against the dictatorship of the Marcoses in the Philippines. So to me, it's completely normal that a song could be so instrumental to revolution. So yeah, I mean, also, we have time for one more question? Do you want to ask your question, Vivian? You had a question in the chat. No? Okay. There's one in the Q&A. Okay, amazing. So Rahul Gudipudi, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, says, I was quite drawn to your mention of working outside of the ego and the desire for collective action, the community, the students, and other participating members somehow becoming a fabric towards a practice of life. How can we as individuals, particularly in the arts, as we appropriate and co-opt political, decolonial, activist narratives, move from the practice of making and producing to the practices of listening, witnessing, and growing?
You have to find some good mentors. So I suggest, well, there's Senor Hanado, who's an amazing mentor. They're all my students in Sorocaba who are amazing mentors. You have to find these people that make you more quiet and allow you to step back without, what is this, how we say, without being anxious that by stepping back, you will be consumed into somebody else's priorities. Because when you're dealing with people of like Senor Hanado, like the students in Sorocaba, it is the community that is the priority. So they are always in what they study and what they work at is always with how to better the community. And with no, the people I have had this experience do not have an ego to take over the process. And this is then the problem, because you can get into some bad situations where there will be one ego person taking over the process, and that will destroy everything that could possibly do anything in the work. So you have to find these people and let the process begin to happen.
So that was a very, I think, thank you for the question, and a very, very significant one. To round off, we have one more coming in by message, which is just to, for the students maybe to talk about some of the objects that they've been creating alongside the last hour or so. And also for Maria Theresa, if you could sort of maybe respond to what this creative environment is that's been developed around your talk as well. And that's coming from Sophia, our director, who's watching at home.
Should I answer first, or should the students maybe?
Let's start with the students. The
Yep.
spin group, if anyone wants to unmute and show and tell with some of these clay creations. Maybe Julia?
Sure. I formed this hat after an example from the images or from the sculptures at the museum. And I found it very interesting actually to listen to a lecture and clay at the same time. It's a very nice experience. It's a bit difficult to concentrate because I sometimes feel like claying is pretty absorbing concentration-wise, but it was a very nice experience and very different. And I think it's a thing to do something with your hands and with your mind at the same time. So yeah, it was really nice.
Maybe Julieta? I'm just sort of looking at some of the screens and inviting some people forward.
Hi, yeah, I actually did the same artifact as Julia, so that was also interesting to sort of look over and compare and see how, how differently we were doing. And also we're sort of 4 of us in this space, so yeah, being together, but also together physically, but also together through the screen was also a nice experience. And yeah, the same as Julia, also I found it a bit difficult at times to get lost in the clay making, but also lost in what Maria Theresa was saying. But it was nice to be experiencing, remaking what Maria Theresa was talking about, and a part of the project, which I find really important.
Gabi has been cradling her. She's maybe you want to say something, Gabia?
Sure. So I made a figurine because I found it very intricate to see like how many details were part of it and trying to replicate every detail. And it was very interesting to be listening while doing this, because on some level I felt a lot of responsibility in the object that I was making, and how should I give it justice in the ways I can. So on some level it was very relaxing, but also a bit difficult because I was constantly thinking about how to make it represent what I've been hearing and seeing, and not miss any important details in what I make.
Would any other of the spin group like to respond, or shall we go to Maria Theresa's final response about what it's been like to be giving a lecture while this environment's been going on? Was there anyone else that wanted to unmute and show and tell?
Hi.
I think it's been interesting to try and also like replicate these sculptures, because I feel like I'm learning these techniques in the process. They're like, if I were to make something, it wouldn't be in the same manner. So I'm learning by doing, but then listening, I actually feel like it goes really, really well together actually with these online lectures, because it keeps you grounded and calm, and not as anxious as I feel Zoom can sometimes be.
And can you also tell us about your black nail polish? Because I think it has a story, no?
Oh, yes. So when we were having the things delivered to us, we actually also got someone put in a black nail polish in the mix so that we could all like have our hands nice and prepared for our camera debut.
I think Carla wanted to say something. And maybe you can also give some context as to how the black nail polish arrived.
Yeah, I put the black nail polish in there. Yeah, I just wanted to share some caring moment for everyone and just to feel ready. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone would have 5 minutes of being aware that their hands would be on the stage. And then, yeah, about the process of making, I felt very aware of my body, or also linked to the whiteness of our bodies and what it means that we're claying these figures and we're reproducing something. But yeah, as Victoria said, the learning by doing was very nice and intense, because they're actually very complicated to make, and you just realize that you have there's so much skill to it. Yeah, I thought it was very relaxing, but also a bit stressful to give credit to these figures by remaking it.
Can I say one thing? I mean, and maybe it's like a big bomb to drop at the end of the conversation, but one thing I have been noticing in the last 2.5 years here in Europe, after moving from the Philippines, where I was born and raised, I find that I find it uncomfortable sometimes that there is a discourse of racial purity around cultural appropriation. I understand that there are limits and that we must be respectful, and that there must not be an urge to extract. But what I often find is the misdigestion of this extremely hyper moral discourse around purity. And I find that it sometimes makes the classrooms whiter. And I see that students who are not white find themselves only comfortable within the canonical and only comfortable within what the European, Anglo-American canon tells us is okay. So I, with much care and nuance and trepidation and fear and love, I think there are ways that we can approach each other. And what I really liked about this exercise was that it's wrapped in this care. And I feel like these sculptures are at the service of a community, or I don't know. Yeah, and it was a really great idea, Maria Teresa, to incorporate this. It's been really nice to see the students in this haptic crisis that we're all living. It's been really nice to see something tactile. And yeah, I guess just to say that this is going to be a zine, and that the nail polish we were talking about was actually delivered by a bike messenger, Tommy Hilsey, who's an artist and an architect and also a professional bike messenger. So Tommy is acting as the spine of our publication, and he delivered the clay today along with other gifts and notes and sort of tokens that the spin students were exchanging amongst each other. So I find this like publication, as performance, and leaving a trace of this event, and for this trace to be circulated, and for the act of publication to already incorporate a circulation, for it not to end up in some like dusty corner somewhere in some godforsaken institution. This gives me life. And it's been a wonderful day, like to prepare for this talk, and with all the pictures that were being exchanged, it was a really warm way to the whole day have this talk present, and to feel connection. And so thanks to Tommy also, who is not here. But yeah, just wanted to, I guess, say that as the final word. Yeah, and just thank you.
I think the final word should go to Maria Thereza.
Yeah, I mean, final word, that's what I meant. That's what I meant. Final word on my on my part. Before.
No, I understood that. I understood that. Okay. Yeah. This way of working is the first time I've done it, and it has come from frustration at doing Zoom presentations, because we are all used to coming into a place to speak. You meet with students, you do some studio visits, you go out to lunch or dinner with people, and you develop a very short term, but a relationship of empathy, intellectuality, well, sometimes hatred, but usually it happens very little. But there is some relationship that happens, and sometimes friendships. Sometimes friendships that go on for quite a long time. And all of that has gone because of Zoom, has gone. We are all getting very energyless with these Zoom talks. It's very difficult for everyone. And so I was trying to figure out a way that the process of the talk could be also about doing something for the community museum, and at the same time giving energy for everyone. And I thought that when I did, during lockdown, when I was working with these replicas, to me, it was really important because it did that. It connected, and thank you for all the SPIN collective members who mentioned that. It connected you straight away to the community, straight away. You're seeing how the community looks at, like what I was looking at was the arms. There's all these subtleties in the sculptures with arms and the body. And sometimes it's one fluid movement that's happening. It's not seen as separate, or sometimes it's seen as separate and very animated. One of you are doing, I think, something like that. It's more like a doll shape. And so through that, you are listening to the talk about the community, you're listening about the land of the community, the water of the community, and you're looking at what the community's culture is, and you're going into it with your body and your mind, that these distinctions exist in some parts of the world, but with your whole being, you know? So your whole being is there, and maybe with that, something can happen. At least some energy happens between us. We did begin conversations. Thank you, Clara, and thank you, Vivian, for guiding. Thank you, Spin Group, for guiding me through conversations and bringing good energies into that. And it was an experiment to try to figure out how do we be with the community that has asked for our assistance. And also, how do we give energy to each other in these times? Thank you very much for making this project work. Thank you.
And on our part, thank you so much, Maria Thereza, for bringing your practice, for sharing this brilliant keynote. Clara, for your moderation, but also for facilitating this engagement with the SPIN group, everyone in the SPIN group, for your energies and for sharing all of these gifts with each other during the exchange of the clay today. Tino, who brought the clay, and also I'd like to thank very much Jeroen Laven, who's been our technical wizard for the evening, as well as Sarah Rose, who's been enabling us to physically be here this evening. Also Drew and Dad, who support our entire public program and especially our keynotes. And our next program is next Friday, which is with Maria Lind and the launch of her publication 7 Years, which will be moderated by Sophia Hernandez Chongchoy, who is also a contributor, and Meta Haven, the designers, I understand, will be with us as well. So please tune in, same time, same channel next week. And thank you again, everyone. This experiment with the clay, I think, has been really rewarding and has really, I think, strengthened a commitment that we have to experimenting with how to come together, learning those lessons that Sylvie Federici gave us and continuing to experiment with them. So thank you once again. And we're going to continue the experiment. We're not going to just force everyone to leave the room. We're going to play music and then stand up. And then for those who are within the Zoom room, you can sort of leave as you would leave a cinema within your own time. So roll tape, please, Jeroen. And thank you again, everyone.